Where are you exactly though? Are you in the office or are you on the golf course and they let you set up a Plaza backdrop?
I wish I had it was that portable. Yeah, no, I'm in the office here in Jacksonville. I like getting in the office. We get in 2-3 days a week when I'm not traveling.
So, okay, so we'll just kick off. Although you and I have talked about this, there's the walk conversation's never very staged or super formal. But we got Jeff Leinan, co-president of Plaza, which Home Mortgage, which by the way, thank you for the reminder on the title, because that's relatively recent, right?
Yeah, 4 or 5 months ago, something like that, roughly. Yep.
Well, congrats. You've been there long enough. I thought you owned the place at this point.
Yeah, I've been here 14 years. That's like 50 years in the mortgage industry, right? That's like
it's like dog years at this point.
Like dog years, exactly.
That's right. We should figure out some multiple like you do with dogs, like that. What is it with dogs? It's times 7.
7 or something like 7 for, and then I don't know, something like that. Yeah, absolutely. Because you don't see many people in our industry that stay at employers. You don't hear 10, 11, 12, 14. We have people here 20 years.
You almost, as someone who, meets a lot of people, retail, wholesale, correspondent, maybe even especially retail, right? Because there seems to be generally more movement on the retail side. But when you see someone that's been at a company for 10 plus years, let's say a loan officer, 10 plus years at the same company. And let's make an assumption it's an independent. It's not a bank loan officer that's maybe in their community and they've been sitting in the same office for 10 years. Strangely, I almost question, I immediately question why 10 years, same company with an IMB? Because it is so abnormal that you almost start to think, well, is that a good thing or is there something wrong with you? Like, are you not auditing things all the time? I don't know.
No, I think it's a good thing. I think every time you, I don't want to say every time you start over, but when you change companies, whether you're calling on realtors or loan officers, there's always an explanation why, right? The first question is, oh, why? Why did you move? So, like, if nothing else, that time period explaining that is kind of dead wood, right? I'm not really accomplishing anything. And I think unfortunately, sometimes people make the wrong decision, right? They go to the wrong company. I know in my dealings with talking to a lot of account executives, it's really hard today to ask all of the right questions, to make sure you get, even if you go through a 2-hour tech demo, there's going to be things you forgot to ask and things you didn't get. And then you're going to go start working there and you're going to like, oh, really? You do that?
But let's talk about that for a second. That's a great point. Why do you think, is it really that it's hard? Or do you think sometimes people are just, human nature is to focus on the thing that you want to hear and not the thing that you don't want to hear?
I think that's part of it. And part of it is, I'm going to say, a lack of planning, meaning, listen, if I was going to do this, I would sit down and make a laundry list of everything I thought was important, in a loan transaction today. If it's technology, do you, are you doing e-hybrid close, runs, just make it a thought process and make a long list, and then take that list and put it into categories, and then make sure you ask those questions. But like anything, I think we get caught up in the newness of it, and we as with any, I'm just going to take tech because I've been in a lot of tech demos, right? Tech salespeople are going to show you what they want to show you. They're going to show you the part that's really cool. They're not going to show you the holes. That's just part of salespeople, right?
Right.
So I think it's just, you got to really make a list. And I think you're also, part of that's true. Like, you want it to be good. So therefore you're already leaning that way and not really look at it and saying, hey, does this technology check all the boxes that I need?
Do you find that the people that you've partnered with over the years, account executives, that maybe do a better job of going through that process are the ones that started off not from a place of pain, that you just engaged in a relationship somehow organically, or because you reached out and just said, hey, we should know each other. And then the relationship evolved over time, versus it's starting from a place of my volume's down and I need to make more money, or my company just pulled a product, or we're inefficient on the tech side out of the blue because they've been telling us we're going to roll out this new platform over the last 12 months and we keep kicking it and kicking it and kicking it. Do you notice that maybe there's some relationship there between pain and no pain necessarily?
Yes, I think I more see it on the people who made a bad decision.
Mm-hmm.
And normally it's because they've been with their same employer for a long time. So they were with their same employer for a long time. Everything was great. Maybe they closed on them, something happened, and they were forced to make a change. And so when they made that change, they didn't necessarily ask the right questions and do everything proper. They got there, they realized, hey, this is not what I thought it was going to be. Now I need to go and re-look my search. And now if anything, they ask, I don't want to say too many questions. There probably isn't too many, but you get into a really detailed list because they're like, I'm not going to make this mistake again, right? I'm not going to get stuck in this. I'm going to make this move. It's going to be the absolute right one. I'm going to know eyes wide open going in.
Well, it's almost like I think of it like from a lending perspective. There's the no income, no doc style, and then there's the full doc style, right? And everybody has that muscle because of what they do for a living when it comes to making sure you're checking all of the boxes necessary to ensure that we have a good loan, something that's going to get to clear to close and ultimately close and fund. But when it comes to our own exploration, it is interesting how often that doesn't happen. I mean, look, coming from the place that I come from and our team and my business partner comes from, we see it all the time. And actually, I'm sure you could probably remember examples on the other side where maybe whether it was you or somebody on your team didn't do the full doc process with a recruit. And it wasn't just the recruit that didn't do it. It was the hiring manager that didn't do it. And you missed something. And then 3 months later, 2 months later, you have to start explaining, oh, well, no, we don't have this, but it didn't come up. So I didn't know that this was important to you. I mean, both sides have a responsibility there.
100%, absolutely. Because the last thing you want to do is bring somebody on board that's not going to be successful or not going to be a good fit, not going to be a good fit for your model, or doesn't want to necessarily do that, because that doesn't work for anybody, right? So yeah, it's got to be a good win. I say all the time when we're looking at recruits or new people to hire, listen, the salesperson has got to be motivated. They've got to be skilled. They got to be everything. The company has to have all the right tools for you to be successful. If you have both of those, you'll be successful. But in today's market, one can't work without the other. Maybe in the old days, you could get by because, things were more manual, there was paper, it was different. But now it's all intertwined. So if both aren't firing, that person's going to struggle no matter, who they are. And same thing on the company side. You have a great company with all the tools. Person's not motivated to reach out and pick up the phone and contact people, they're not going to know what you have to offer, so you're also not going to be successful. So everything's got to work together. With
partnering with new salespeople that bring, let's call it what it is, books of business, right? Relationships that they've built trust with. Wholesale, obviously different than retail, where, and I know things have changed from how long does a submission packet take, or do we even need one anymore to at least get out of the gate and start having loans come in the door? But that account executive has trusted relationships, and both sides are counting on the fact that they can go back and capture some amount of those trusted relationships. Retail, same sort of thing, whether it's referral partners or a customer database, or it's a transferable book of business. That person doesn't need a job, but they see the value in something that you can bring or another company can bring that creates an efficiency for them or their referral partners or their customers. But it's different than hiring staff that needs a job and you have a very specific hole to fill. And that's where without a really specific process and understanding of your company value proposition across shared core competencies, you're either not going to win because you didn't cover something that was important to this person, or you're going to win for the wrong reasons and end up with a challenging hire. By the way, has tremendous opportunity cost, not just the cost of hiring someone, but the opportunity cost that, hey, if I just went down this path with this person in Dallas, Texas, and they only lasted for 6 months, Dallas, Texas is kind of aware of that now. And so there's so many reasons to make sure that you have a process and not get outside of it. But look, man, it's challenging when everybody's happy and you're enjoying the conversations to know that you may just be opening up a door to something that could be a slight negative. But it's important to have that. It's like a marriage, right? We might as well know this as we get out of the gate. So as we're, spending time together, we're not thinking that you pulled the wool over my eyes. I thought you were somebody that you're not.
I think that this is like a misnomer for candidates too, I think, right? So some people come in and they're like, oh, I want to be the only wholesale rep in all of Texas. And I'm like, no, you really don't, because the truth is, when you break down clients, your trusted book, advisor's book of business is going to be, this, whatever, 12, 15. You may have 50, but your trusted 12 is not the same as that person's 12. It's not the same as that person's 12. And at the end of the day, rising tides lift all boats. So if you have a brand and you're successful and everyone's talking about you, it's actually better to have more success in a market than be, hey, I'm the only person here.
I love that. I love that. From the other side, though, sometimes that feels like it's easy to say. If you've never experienced before, and maybe you're with companies where the culture is everybody just sort of cannibalizes each other and the cream rises to the top. Because,
right.
Look, a lot of your competition over the years, let's be honest, that has been the play. Just oversaturate a market, figure out who are going to be the top 1 or 2, and the rest of them can just go away. So you're in that battle. If that's your model and your culture, you're in that battle against other people's experiences before they even trust you yet.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think you have to, one of the beautiful things about today is we have data, right? We have information. Right. So we know how big the market is. We know what the opportunity is. Right. We can look at it. I think that's a lot different than times past where we were sort of guessing. So I think, the last thing I want to do is, throw some food in for 3 lions when there's 7 lions. That's not healthy for anybody. It just doesn't work. You want to make sure there's enough room. However, I think there's also that mindset to say, hey, you know what? There's plenty of here for me to be successful, but I don't have to be the only person. In fact, it's better that I'm not, because it's going to be easier for me. And people are going to be questioning, hey, what's this with Plaza? I am hearing and seeing Plaza or whoever, fill in the name of the bank of the lender. I just think it's that I want to have all this. And again, it depends on your product mix too. If you're a one-trick pony or one product mix, then yeah, I get it. You need a vast market to sort of call on, right? But if you can go very deep and you have a lot of products, then it's better to go narrow with a smaller account base. So,
and that goes back to what you said earlier, which is the need to ensure that you're doing a full audit of both sides. Okay, so you bring up data, and so how things are different today and relatively recently, quite frankly, because although data has been floating around, actionable and usable data has been a challenge. Having all the data in a spreadsheet that you get a report on every 30 days, there's not much you can do with that unless you spend a ton of money to model it out and maybe build out some proprietary tech. Now, not so much the case. There's options where that data really can create value for you. Talk a little bit, go back to when you first got into the business. And I was poking around on past conversations that you and I had. I guess I forgot that you went to NYU. I just think of you as a Florida guy now,
right.
But talk about kind of your early days in the industry and maybe some of the biggest differences that you see stand out today versus then.
So that's a really good question. So, I've basically lived in, 3 corners of the country. I grew up actually in Seattle. Born and raised, went to my undergrad in Seattle, and spent most of my early mortgage career as a retail originator out there.
Okay.
I was, 21, 22. I looked like I was 12. And, even back then, the average age of realtor was probably in, the 50s. And, of course, I'm going to go to the, area that has the highest loan amounts, right?
Of course.
Going to I'm already calculating my commission checks, right? So I'm going right in. But so I started out that, and that was a challenging time. Breaking into retail, that young of an age is difficult. But I found some great success and some early wins. I got a funny story actually. You're running around the real estate offices back then. You're trying to get 5 minutes, 10 minutes with somebody. You're trying to get somebody to pay attention to you. And there was an office, and the biggest producer, she had a partner, and she was obviously very, I'm going to say needy, very, needed a lot of attention. That's, kind of par for the course with really top.
That's what I was going to say. You said it, but that's what I was going to say.
Yeah, that's true, right? So she comes out and she needed stamps, right? She run around the office. Where's the stamps? I can't believe I don't have any stamps. I gotta mail this now. She's screaming. So I'm like looking around and nobody had any stamps. So I ran out of the real estate office. I went down the street. I went to the store. I bought some stamps, and I come trotting back in the office. And when I got back, she was still looking for stamps, still kind of going up. So I walk up to her with the book of stamps and I hold it, and she kind of gave me this weird look. And then she went to grab the stamps, and I held on to it. And I said, listen, I'm here to help you. I have this for you. I just want 5 minutes. It doesn't have to be right now. It can be anytime in the next 3 days. This is all I ask. And sure enough, she gave me the 5 minutes. And long story short, her and her partner turned out to be my best realtor, probably 3-4 loans a month, sometimes 5. They were a great partner. And it worked out. I went in the call, I asked her, and she just, I don't know if she felt like, wow, this person really cared enough to stop what they were doing and help me. I don't know what it was. Maybe I just got lucky.
Well, I love that story, but it's also proof that particular types of human interaction work today just like they did back then, because although somebody might not be scrambling around looking for stamps anymore, if you pay attention, there's still a problem that they need solved. And if you can solve that problem for them, either you have them now or they feel at least beholden to give you a shot, which maybe at a minimum, that's what happened when you got the stamps. It's like, okay, now I see your face. You've been walking around this office for the last however many minutes and I haven't even noticed you. Now, all of a sudden I notice you. Number two, you have the confidence to solve a problem that I had, because you just solved my problem, and to tell me I want something in return. If all it is 5 minutes of your time. I love that story. I think it's also a reminder that I think I put something out on LinkedIn not that long ago that, and look, this is coming from someone who, with partners, built a SaaS platform out of work that we were already doing. We just saw, hey, wait a minute, if we build something here, it's scalable, the industry can use it. It obviously creates an efficiency. But what tech doesn't do and what data won't do, if we're still dealing with relationships, is you still have to have a conversation. You still have to problem solve. You still have to build trust. You still have to make a connection. And my comment on LinkedIn was, the day that technology solves all of that is the day that you're done.
Right. We don't need it anymore. I don't see that happening in our industry. I mean, there's talk of it. I do think we're going to become more efficient. We're going to have to do more, right? So a retail loan officer that was doing, 1-2 loans a month, they're gonna have to do 3 or 4 loans a month. But we're not. I don't think that we're in a position, and that's actually a really good point I want to talk about. But I want to hop back to so Seattle retail originator, went out to the East Coast, started a wholesale career, worked at a lot of big banks. 2007 came down to Florida and been with Plaza ever since. I do think we have a kind of an interesting thing that's going on in our industry right now. And that is when 2007 came, we sort of lost a lot of people that have been, let's call it 7, 8, 10, 12 years in the industry. They just didn't make it through that rough time. So the people that made it through, like myself, had been people that have been doing it for a while. And so we lost a lot. So fast forward, 10, 12 years, 14 years where we are now, I see kind of like a barbell in our industry, right? So we've got people that are, been in the industry for quite a while. And then we have a little, I'm not saying a complete gap, but a bigger gap, I'm sure. And then we have a lot of, fairly new entrants in the last, whatever you want to call it, 5 years, kind of 2017, 18, 19. And I see that their needs are very different. And I think part of it is the newer entrants to the market maybe don't value, and it's my personal opinion, maybe don't value what you were talking about on the relationship side as much as some of the people that have been here, because they don't have the benefit of seeing the problems yet. Like, you know, they think of the transaction as more of a data transaction, more of a, you know, I do this, I get this, where the truth of our industry is we solve problems and we come across new and unique problems all the time. And one of the things I love about the industry. So finding a partner or finding people that you can work with that help you when you don't have the benefit of 20 or 25 years experience in solving problems similar, I think is really beneficial. So just kind of one of the things I see in the industry, and it's kind of legit.
Well, no, do you think that's also not just experience, but it's just the generation? I mean, you're coming from a place where I can solve problems in an instant by just asking my phone, you know, how to do something or how to find something. Do you think it's also maybe a bit of rewiring, which maybe, as I think about it, isn't such a bad thing if we still all agree that the mortgage industry in particular is still somewhat behind when it comes to utilizing technology to create those efficiencies? And maybe not just do we have the proper tech stacks, but do we have adoption of that technology, that maybe that these younger generations are the ones that they've already fully adopted technology. You don't need to teach them how to do that. Maybe it's your job or the industry's job to then teach how to couple that tech efficiency with still some sort of, you know, real human interaction where you're problem solving.
I think that's a huge part of it. I mean, the generations grew. It's a YouTube world, right? I want to figure out how to do something as YouTube it in, you know, 2 minutes or less. It shows me how to do it. The problem, I won't say the problem, the opportunity in our industry is not everything is a YouTubeable moment, because, you know, as I always say, if it takes more than 3 sentences to say it, it's not really an email or comment. It's actually a conversation now, because I'm going to say this and then you're going to say this, and then and now it's a conversation because we have to go back and forth. So versus just, hey, you know what, I want to figure out how to do this one thing,
right,
and I can figure that out with YouTube. But if I figure out that one thing and then it leads to another thing, then it leads to another thing, and I have 3 potential variables off of that, now I need to go to I need a consultant almost to help me through. And I guess that's where I'm kind of going with this, is that I think that part is a little undervalued. And I think it will become more valued from the, you know, and I'm not saying people experience necessarily or always correlates to it, but having access to people who can help you solve the problems is really super important.
It sometimes comes across as like a bit of a throwaway, you know, this whole, you know, the purchase of a home will be the you know, the biggest asset, the biggest purchase that most people will ever make in their entire life. And so that's different than me ordering a pair of Vans on Zappos.com or something, or honestly, even different than me ordering a car from CarMax, as an example. Right. You know, you're 16 years old, you already have experience with a vehicle at some level, even if it's that you're still ignorant when it comes to how this vehicle works or what the true value is. Yeah, I can run a calculator and I know what a car is. It doesn't seem like that big a deal. I'm in it every day. But by the time I'm ready to purchase a home, I wonder, is there really going to be a point where most people don't just want to sit across or see someone's face and say, tell me I'm making the right decision. Tell me that I'm not screwing up other things, my retirement, my ability to send my kids to the school that I want to send them to, my ability to pay for healthcare should I need it, whatever. I mean, it's a different scenario. And I don't know that may be the variable that separates it from technology taking over so many other things that are consultative in nature.
I think, you know, real estate's a perfect example, right? So I think when you look at the NAR data, most people, I don't remember the exact number, 92% are still using realtors. And the ones that are not, it's usually because it's a family sale or whatever. They're still involved in using realtors. And when they asked them, a lot of the reason why was exactly that. They want to make sure they're making the right decision.
Right.
But someone who knows the market and understands, and, you know, I can look at a house and say, hey, I like this house. but maybe there's one down the street I'm going to like more. Maybe there's something here I'm not thinking about because I've never made this, this gigantic purchase before. So I think people are looking for that, at least on the retail side, they're looking for that assurance, and they're looking for the advice, and that's what they're paying for. And I think they're willing to do it. I don't think it's even that different in the mortgage space. They want to know, I think we tend to just go out and say, hey, everyone just wants the best possible deal, on the mortgage side, the best rate, the best fee. And that's not always necessarily the case. Sometimes they want to make sure they have to close on time for whatever. They have other issues they have to solve. Maybe the issue is they're buying this house because it's the only one they could find, but they actually hate all the bathrooms and don't think they could live with it. And they're like, hey, you know what? If you could help me have enough funds to renovate these two things, that would make me happy. So
right.
I think a lot of variables are options that we can go into, but I think you're right that it's still going to be a people business ultimately.
Yeah, I think like me, for example, the house that I'm in right now, I wouldn't be in that house if it wasn't for a realtor. I know I wouldn't be. Yeah, I didn't even want to look at the house, and then she convinced, of course my wife convinced me, so that was the number one convincing factor. But I remember standing in the kitchen with her, and the kitchen to this home that had nothing in it at the time, was built in the 50s, but it needed work. And I could see it, but I was a disqualifier in that moment. And I made a comment to her like, well, this isn't going to work, and this is the reason why. And she countered. It wasn't a dollar counter. It had nothing to do with the money. It was more of a counter in what she saw and what she could envision. And, 4 years later, I'm incredibly thankful for her to consulting with me in that moment, or else I never would have done it. I also, look, I can think of experiences all around. I have, a young sister-in-law and her husband, and they're the exact age of the ones that you would think, well, these are the ones that aren't going to want to use an agent, and they're not going to want to go through a face-to-face lender. They're going to shop for the cheapest rate, the best rate that they can get. And both of them are highly educated, both education as well as financially educated. They absolutely wanted to use an agent, and they absolutely wanted to use an originator that was local and someone they could talk to. And if that meant they spent just a little bit more, but to have that peace of mind of making the proper decision, it was worth it to them. I know that when we look at the ends of the spectrum, you're always going to have those two ends where they don't need it and they don't need it. But right. Everybody else is a really big number. So let's talk a little bit about wholesale and how you've seen it ebb and flow. We're in an environment right now where the broker market shares come back in a big way over the last couple of years, at least, maybe more. But we've also seen those markets where, gosh, it wasn't that long ago where I think there was discussion around, broker market share was below 5%. And we were wondering, is this even going to be a viable business anymore? And now here we are. Talk about those ebb and flows, and then where you see things maybe 5 years from now.
That's a great question. So, clearly the data shows that broker wholesale market share is growing. I'll be honest with you, it's growing, and it's growing pretty rapidly. And there's really a lot of reasons for that. I'm actually somewhat surprised it's not growing more because of all of the reasons that go into it. I think that technology has really changed it, right? So you don't need as much. The lenders are providing so much to the originators now that you don't need the infrastructure that you once needed. And you have a lot of product variability, extremely competitive pricing, because they've found out ways to really, squeeze out the execution. Excuse me. So I think it's a really great model. And in all honesty, I think it will continue to grow a little bit because it makes sense from an execution standpoint for a lot of people. So I think one of the things that, and it gets back to the conversation we were having a little bit ago about originators. So I think one of the things that what keeps them out of the wholesale is sort of that direct management situation. So if you do work for a pretty large broker, you may not have a 10 to 12 direct reporting relationship. You're not going to have some of that middle management. you're going to have, maybe, one person owner, whatever and you're going to have a group of originators. So you may not necessarily get the same interaction. However, I would argue you don't, obviously, A, there's a cost to that. And then B, I don't think you really need it today. If you find the right wholesale partners, if you're able to utilize technology, if you're able to utilize the webinars and the YouTubes and everything else, I don't necessarily need it. Now, again, it gets back to who are your wholesale account executives. The industry, I think, is somewhat devaluing that role a little bit, the role of the account executive, when I think they really need to kind of sit back and say, hey, you know what? I need this person. I need not only, the help on these individual loan files, but I need some more knowledge about the local marketplace, updates on guidelines and where I can be looking, who I should be marketing to, what is unique about this product, what's my target, all of these types of things that I think they used to sort of rely on their manager for. Come out and say they can actually rely on the wholesale company, the wholesale account executive, if they're good, and they can get a lot of that same direction at a much better, cost per se.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, so I see it evolving a little bit, and it's continuing to evolve. And some of it has to do with, with how the originator segments sort of break out.
If there's going to be a reason why there's a pullback on the broker market share side. So I don't remember where we are today. Are we at 20%?
Last number I think was, in that 2022.
Right around there. So it was a pretty significant number. So let's say 22, and you believe there's room to run, which I wouldn't argue with that. Absolutely. But let's say there's a pullback of 5, 10, 15% at some point. What do you think the reason would be for the pullback? I mean, we've seen it over the years, right? So if it was to happen again, why do you think that would happen?
The only thing I could think of would be maybe some dramatic compliance changes that I don't foresee coming. I mean, that's really what drove it the first time, right? Dramatic compliance changes, rule changes, where people don't think they're fair, don't understand, whatever it may be. Maybe they just don't. It was easier to get under the umbrella. For a time period there after 07, we such an exodus of wholesalers. There's actually a lack of capacity at the time too, which also brought some people under different umbrellas. So I don't.
Well, we'll talk. Stay there for a second though, right? Because I was looking at the top 20 lists from 22 on the wholesale side, and it's amazing to me how many of those companies are either out of business or they're not in wholesale anymore. So do you see that potential again, not because of the regulatory or compliance environment, but just we've got less and less players in the space. Now, granted, for Plaza, for you, I know volume is down, but that still creates a market share opportunity as some of your competition exits the channel. But do you see a little bit of that? I mean, on the surface, it looks like that's happening a little bit right now.
I don't see that happening, only because, obviously we're coming off of 20, right? 2021, the industry, I would argue, is actually still sort of right sizing from those time periods. Doesn't happen as quick as we think it's going to. It takes time for people to realize, hey, you know what, we don't need as much capacity as we had in 20 and 21. So I think that I would argue that there's plenty of capacity still in the industry. And the other thing that's changed is, now versus 2007 is we don't need as many people, right? We can ramp up a lot faster. We have a lot more automation and technology. So, where before you had to hire all these people and train them and get them in your office and the computers and everything else, like that ramp up time is much less than it used to be.
Right.
So I think between the two of those, I don't necessarily see a capacity issue at all coming anytime in the near future.
Does your gut tell you that over the next, 12 months or so, that we'll see new players enter the space? And I don't mean new like, Loan Store as an example. I know that's new, but and my friend Phil Shoemaker out there doing his thing with them. To me, it's the same people. They're bolting onto something that is new. But I mean, maybe companies that are completely not in the space right now? Do you see, as the dust settles, some competition coming in that maybe we don't know who that is right now?
Possibly. I mean, it's I think one of the things about wholesale is there is a lot of the technology is sort of built, right? And it's evolved over time. So when you look at some of the sort of off the shelf, you may not get everything that you want. You may only get 75, 80% of the way there. So the next question is, from a client's perspective, from a broker perspective, originator perspective, if they're looking for X and you're only able to provide, 65 or 75% of that, what kind of market share are you going to be able to gain? And what's the cost and time to get that fully built and transitioned in? So I think that the ramp up period is probably a little longer than it has been in the past because of our reliance on technology now. And so I think that that's part of it. But I'm sure people will come in, right? And I think, people that are already in the mortgage space, possibly retail people, will view it as another channel. We're going to see other entrants. I don't disagree that we won't. I just think that the ramp up time is probably more difficult than some people probably think it is.
That's interesting. I didn't think about that. I mean, on the one hand, I would think that maybe the access to off-the-shelf tech platforms makes it easier, but there's still an implementation and adoption component to that can take, a significant amount of time. I mean, look, we talk about it on our side of the business, software, SaaS, is that, we've got several years under our belt now and a lot of money invested and a lot of time invested. There's always going to be competition, but we know from experience how long it takes to build. You don't just do it overnight. And if you do it overnight, even if you have the capital and the resources and the human capacity, usually building it overnight means that you don't even know what you've broken yet. And now you got to go, it's going to take time to fix all these little holes that you didn't even know existed. So that's an interesting point. I never thought about it that way.
And then think about all those upgrades you've made over time. That time period you figured out, I want to do this, right? I want to do that. I need to do this. So all that sort of upgrade in time period takes time.
Well, gosh, what we were talking about this yesterday, that we've, Model Match has had 13 feature pushes, new pushes over the last 12 months. And compared to what, other companies, that's a lot. Now you could look at it like, wow, those guys at Model Match are really smart. They keep thinking of things to add that's going to create value for the user. Well, no, sometimes, but no. Usually it's that a user says, hey, what would create value for me? And then we listen to that user, knowing that if we agree, well, then other users are probably thinking the same thing. And if we don't fill that gap, we potentially could lose users, which is exactly what you're saying about how difficult it is to enter the market as a new player, because you don't just enter, you then have to figure out all these things as you go. And you're not going to get all those things until you're getting feedback, not only from your business partners, but from your account executives and those that are on your team. Absolutely. And by the way, the needs are probably changing too, right? So, software, man. I mean, well, right. And the industry, it's like you never get a summer break. It's never built. It's never done. You're never going to be happy and say, oh, I'm done. I'm done. You're never done. No. What haven't we talked about? Anything you want to talk about that we didn't cover? Let's see. We talked about the industry a little bit. We talked about account executives, a little bit of my history. I think, I just think that just in general too, the sales skills in our industry, need constant refining. Mm-hmm. We talk about that a lot. And I don't mean, I hate to use the term like, vacuum cleaner or car salesman, where it's a transactional, because we're at the end of the day, we're in a relationship business, right? Right. Trusting and everything. But at the same token, I need to get the opportunity, like I talked about earlier, to create the trust with somebody. So I think, one of the things we try to do at Plaza, in addition to obviously creating just a great culture, diversity, everything. And I think that's important too. A lot of people with diverse backgrounds,
different experiences, coming in and providing your feedback, super, super important. But I think in addition to all that, I think that just continuing to help people focus on sales skills is really important. A little bit of a lost art, I think, in getting it. And if you've ever worked with anybody who can actually train sales properly, I've never met anybody who doesn't believe there's not value in the science of that, in addition to the art. And I just think there's a lot to be said for that in our industry, if people will work on those skills.
I agree. I've never had sales training. I don't think I'm embarrassed to say, it's just a fact. I haven't read the books. Like when I hear Good to Great and I hear, all the mortgage bankers, talk about the same books, and dang, I probably should have read them by now. I haven't read them. I actually pushed away from them because I was always like, I'm not a sales guy. I'm not in sales. I don't sell. You realize over time that selling doesn't mean that you're not being a trusted advisor. The two can live in the same world. It does make me think also, though, of, I know, your story of coming from Washington Mutual, a very big company, very corporate, lots of structure in place. And then when that came to an end, you had options. And you went with the option that was a little more family friendly, a little smaller, a little more intimate, I guess I would say. So thinking about that, does that make it harder or easier to give account executives some of that sales mastery that you talk about? Meaning, like, I remember back in the day of, account executives sort of, hey, we're going to send this new account executive to a market that's not their market, and they're just going to shadow another account executive for 90 days. I mean, I don't think the industry does that much anymore, because we're trying to get to ROI so quickly on that hire that we need them producing their own volume, right, as quickly as possible. Are there some things that you've been able to maybe accomplish in a company like Plaza versus maybe the larger corporate environment that you've seen in the past?
So I really try to focus on, obviously, I think as an industry, we focus on the activity level, right?
Mm-hmm.
How people am I talking, especially now with all the CRMs, right? How did you disposition it? How many leads did you we
I feel like you're talking to me directly on that.
So we focus on that, but then we don't necessarily focus on the quality of the conversation, right? Like, I got the person on the phone, like, what happened? What was the quality? And I think, sales skills is kind of it has a bad connotation to it. Really what we're talking about is better communication skills. Because if I'm trying to convince you to work with Plaza, I can do a couple of things. I can drip you with emails and texts and phone calls and say, hey, we got this cool thing. Hey, we got this cool thing. We got this. Meanwhile, you don't really care about any of it. Right. Or I can call you up and have a cup of coffee with you for 5 minutes or 10 minutes. My famous thing is, listen, I just need 5 minutes or 10 minutes. And one of the greatest things I ever learned was you actually set a timer for those 10 minutes. When the people say, hey, I only want 5 minutes. And this does a couple things. One, it immediately shows that you care about their time. Two, what happens when you're having these quick conversations a lot, what's going on in the person's mind, and they're automatically thinking, how do I get rid of this person, right? I don't have any value, right? So they're literally not listening to you because they're thinking about how to get out of this situation. Well, anybody can give 5 or 10 minutes. So if you say, hey, in 10 minutes, if you say I'm out, then I can actually now actively listen and have a conversation with you and share what is important to me. So I think that really works. And then listen, it's all about, what do you need? What's your pain points? What's working for you? What's not working for you? How can I help? And then figuring out, hey, can I actually add value? If I can't add value, then great, pick up my stuff and leave. If I can add value, then it's my job to demonstrate to you where I can add that value and why we should give an opportunity. So that's all under the sales umbrella, but in my mind, it's really communicating. It's like, hey, I have something of value. You're perceiving it as, I don't, because you don't really know it. I just need to find a way to figure out what's important to you, because I don't want to just bombard you with stuff and hope I get lucky and hit something that you need. What I really want to do is figure out what's important and then position it. So I think that's what we try to focus on, is the the quality of the interaction, in addition to the dials and, you know, how many touches and all that, which I think as in not necessarily in the mortgage space as much as other industries, that's where people tend to focus on.
Yeah, look, I say it all the time. If we have to talk about how many dials somebody's making, we already have a problem, because that means, I mean, there's two ends of that spectrum. There's the dials and there's the outcomes, whatever that is. If you're an originator, that's a closed loan. If you're a branch manager trying to hire LOs, that's the hire. If you're Plaza trying to bring on new account executives, or an account executive trying to bring on new broker partners, it's the same thing. It's all the same. You're still recruiting this broker partner and building trust. But if we're having to have a conversation about that end of the spectrum, how many touches, we already have a problem, because we're working our way this way. And I'm hoping we're going to stop over here, right? Okay, the pipeline is telling me that up to this point, everything looks fine. We just need a better conversion from this point forward. But if I have to go all the way over here, yeah, there's a bigger problem. And man, did you just say some things that, you know, is like music to my ears, right? Which is, I mean, look, whether there's that trick of setting a timer, or at least being sensitive to the fact that, you know, hey, we scheduled 45 minutes. We're at the 40-minute mark. Before I go any further, you know, look, I want to be sensitive to your time. And that person's now hearing, I heard what you said. I care about that, because I know we're both very busy. And by the way, it's not just you're busy, I'm busy too. Like, I have something else. We both have things to do. But then using the interaction to set an action. Stop trying to close the opportunity, close the action. And usually over time, and by the way, there's a patience component to this, right? Like, you have to feel good about the win of setting the action and not the win of the commission that you just didn't make yet. Over time, you start to find that those things do layer on top of themselves. They create multiples, and you get where, look, it goes right back to where we started this conversation. It's process over event. If you treat it like an event, you're going to create problems for yourself. If you treat it like a process, yes, you have to have patience. It's going to take a little bit of time, but that's where the gold is buried. All right, before I let you go, this business isn't easy. I mean, I'm sure your account executives tell you that every day. It's not easy for you either. What do you? I know you're a big tennis player in Florida. What do you tennis? What else? What else do you do that out of the business that kind of helps you reset?
Mostly tennis, I would say. You know, family time. My son in Vermont, so we travel a little bit up there to see him. But I would say that's mostly what we do. Occasionally play golf, but golf's a big commitment. You know, I just don't have the time to put into that. So I would say that's mostly what we do.
Mostly tennis. You haven't converted to pickleball? Is that like blasphemy, me to even say pickleball to you?
I'm a pretty serious tennis player, but I have played pickleball, and I do. You know, it's funny, you probably don't know this, but pickleball actually originated in Seattle. And as
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I played pickleball before I even played tennis. So
I don't think a lot of people realize how long pickleball has actually been around.
Been around a long time.
Yeah.
So yeah, they played it, but it's you know, that man, I think it's the fastest growing sport in America.
It is. That's what I keep reading about it. I have a set. I have like a pickleball set that we don't play, because we have this perfect spot in the back that's like paved, and we can just set it up and go. But I don't really know how to play, because I haven't tried to play. And so Nikki, my wife, and I will just volley, but inevitably I can't help but just try to rope one down the line and laugh, and then the game's over at that point, because she doesn't think that's funny.
Right.
So anyway,
marriage either.
That's right. I want our dinner to be good that night, so that's where we call it off. Hey Jeff, thanks for doing this. I know we've been talking about it for a while, and this conversation went exactly the way I thought it would, which is just start to finish. We could do this for probably 3 more hours, but Jeff Leinan, co-president, Plaza Home Mortgage. Thanks for coming on the walk. And look, if anybody wants to learn more about Jeff, you can find him on LinkedIn, hit him up, or grab me and I can make an introduction.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
All right, brother, you got it. We'll see you soon.
Talk to you.